My cousin destroyed a 150-year-old family heirloom, a priceless quilt that had been stitched by 3 generations of women in my family. She cut it into pieces to make a line of vintage-inspired designer jackets for her influencer brand. She called it an upcycled art project. I called it a desecration. When she unveiled it, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I smiled, congratulated her on her vision, and then I went home and systematically dismantled her entire life. She thought she was just cutting up fabric. She had no idea she was cutting the final thread of her own future. Let's start where she did, with a pair of scissors and a stunning lack of humanity. It all happened at the annual family gathering at our old lake house in Vermont, a place that smells like pine needles and damp wood, and 100 years of memories. The house belongs to my great-aunt Clara, who is 94 and has a mind sharper than a surgeon's scalpel. And at the heart of that house, for as long as I can remember, has been the Starlight quilt. It wasn't just a blanket. It was our family's manuscript. My great-great-grandmother started it in 1872. Each woman who came after her, her daughter, then my grandmother, added a panel, a story told in thread. There were patches from my grandfather's army uniform, a square from my mother's wedding dress, a tiny piece of my own baby blanket embroidered with my name, Maya. It wasn't just cotton and thread. It was our history, our sorrows, our triumphs, all stitched together. I'm a textile archivist for a museum. My entire career is built on understanding that objects like this aren't just things. They are living documents. The Starlight quilt was our Rosetta Stone. My cousin Brianna never understood that. To Brianna, history is something you find on Pinterest. She's a social media influencer, the kind who uses words like aesthetic and vibe to describe things that have no soul. She has 500,000 followers who watch her redecorate her sterile white apartment and promote ethically questionable fast fashion. Her brand is all about authenticity, which to her means slapping a vintage filter on a photo of a $12 avocado toast. The tension between us has always been there, simmering under the surface of forced family politeness. I'd spend holidays carefully cataloging old family photos, and she'd breeze in, complain about the lack of Wi-Fi, and ask if we could paint the antique mahogany furniture a cute sage green. She saw history as raw material to be consumed for content. I saw it as something to be protected, to be revered. Our family, bless their conflict-avoidant hearts, always just laughed it off. Oh, that's just Brianna, so creative. A few weeks before the gathering, Brianna had been dropping hints about a massive new project she was launching. It's going to be iconic, she'd texted in the family group chat. I'm finally blending my love for vintage with my modern design ethos. I'd rolled my eyes so hard I think I saw my own brain. I assumed she was just going to release a line of t-shirts with faded pictures of old barns on them. I was so wrong. Great-aunt Clara, whose eyesight had started to fail, had recently entrusted the quilt to me for its annual cleaning and inspection. You know its heart, Maya, she told me, her frail hand patting mine. You keep it safe. I had it stored in a special acid-free archival box in a climate-controlled closet at the lake house. It was safe, or so I thought. The day of the gathering, Brianna was buzzing with an almost manic energy. She'd set up a little pop-up display on the back porch, complete with a professional photographer and mimosas. Big reveal at 2 p.m., everyone, she chirped. The whole family was there. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all placating her, indulging her endless need for an audience. I stayed inside, chatting with Aunt Clara, feeling a familiar sense of dread. At 2 p.m., Brianna clinked a glass. "Okay, everyone. Thank you all for being my inspiration. As you know, I've been working on a project that truly honors our family's legacy." She gestured dramatically to a clothing rack covered by a silk sheet. My stomach twisted. The word legacy coming from her mouth felt like a curse. With a flourish, she pulled off the sheet. Hanging on the rack were 6 denim jackets. Each one had been artfully, brutally slashed and adorned with patches of fabric. My eyes scanned the pieces. A faded blue calico. A dark silk with tiny hand-stitched silver stars. A square of linen with the faint, unmistakable cursive embroidery of my grandmother's initials. It was the Starlight quilt. She had butchered it. She had taken our history, our soul, and turned it into a fashion accessory. The room was silent for a half-second before the predictable chorus began. "Oh, Brianna, how unique!" my aunt gushed. "So edgy," her brother added. Brianna beamed, her face glowing with pride. "Each one is a one-of-a-kind piece of wearable art," she announced. "I'm calling the line Fragmented History." My blood ran cold. I couldn't breathe. I looked at the jackets, at the jagged, raw edges of what was once a perfect whole. I saw the patch from my mother's wedding dress, cut into an asymmetrical triangle and sewn crookedly onto a sleeve. I felt a wave of nausea so profound I had to grip the doorframe to stay upright. Brianna caught my eye from across the porch. She gave me a triumphant little smirk. She knew. She knew exactly what she was doing. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I was going to do. I didn't make a scene. That's what she wanted. She wanted me to scream, to cry, to validate her narrative that I was the jealous, boring, traditionalist cousin who couldn't appreciate her genius. A public meltdown would have just been more content for her. So I composed myself. I walked over, my feet feeling like lead blocks. I touched the sleeve of one of the jackets, tracing the outline of a star my great-great-grandmother had sewn. "Wow, Brianna," I said, my voice eerily calm. "You really have a vision." She puffed up with pride. "Right. It's about taking something old and making it relevant again." "You've certainly done that," I said, meeting her gaze. I smiled. It was the coldest smile of my life. "Congratulations." Then I turned, walked back into the house, and went straight to the closet where the archival box was supposed to be. It was there, but it was empty, save for a few stray threads and tiny, discarded scraps. She hadn't even had the decency to hide the evidence. She was proud of the murder she'd committed. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark. The image of those butchered jackets burned into my mind. I wasn't just sad. I wasn't just angry. I was activated. The part of me that had spent years politely swallowing my frustration, the part that always chose peace over confrontation, was gone. It had been sliced away, just like the quilt. In its place was a quiet, cold, diamond-hard resolve. This wasn't just about a quilt anymore. It was about a lifetime of this kind of violation, of careless destruction disguised as creativity. It was about the slow, creeping erasure of everything that mattered, replaced by everything that was hollow. I went online and found Brianna's brand website. The Fragmented History line was already up for pre-order. The jackets were priced at $2,800 each. The description read, "Handmade from a genuine antique American quilt. Each jacket is a unique piece of art that reimagines the past for the modern muse. By deconstructing what was, we create what can be." Deconstructing. What a sterile academic word for desecration. I took out my laptop and began my work. I am, by profession, an archivist. My job is to find, document, preserve, and connect. I build narratives from fragments. I find the truth in the dust, and I decided to build a true archive of what Brianna had done. First, I documented everything. I took high-resolution photos of the empty archival box. I carefully collected the discarded scraps she'd left behind, placing each one in a labeled glassine envelope. I took screenshots of her website, of every post she'd made promoting the line, of every fawning comment from her followers. I downloaded the video my uncle had taken of her big reveal, zooming in on the moment her eyes met mine, that smug, knowing look on her face. Then I started digging. My first call was to a man named Arthur Pence, the most respected antique textile appraiser on the East Coast. I had worked with him on a museum acquisition a few years back. He was notoriously grumpy and hated modern art, which made him perfect. "Arthur," I said when he answered. "It's Maya. I have a hypothetical for you." I described the starlight quilt in meticulous detail. Its age, its provenance, the materials, the unique stitchwork, the documented history connecting it to every generation of my family. He was quiet for a long time. "It's not a hypothetical, is it, my dear?" "No," I said. "From your description, a piece like that, with its provenance fully documented, at auction, you'd be looking at a minimum of $150,000, potentially much more, to the right collector or institution." My hands were shaking. "And what would it be worth, Arthur, if someone cut it into pieces and sewed them onto denim jackets?" I heard him inhale sharply. It was a sound of genuine pain. "Worth? My dear, it would be worth nothing. It would be a tragedy, a crime against history. Anyone who would do that is not an artist. They are a barbarian." "Would you be willing to put that in writing?" I asked. "I'll have a formal letter of valuation and a statement of cultural significance on your desk by Monday," he said, his voice grim. This wasn't the first time Brianna had destroyed something I loved. The scale was different now, but the pattern was the same. I remember being 12, spending an entire summer building a perfect 2-scale model of the USS Constitution from a complex kit my dad had bought me. It had hundreds of tiny, intricate pieces, rigging made of fine thread, and hand-painted sails. I kept it on a shelf in my room at the lake house. It was my masterpiece. Brianna, who was 10 at the time, had her own project that summer, making potions out of mud, glitter, and my mother's expensive perfume. One afternoon, I came back from a swim to find my beautiful ship submerged in a bucket of her murky, sparkling potion. The wood was warped, the paint was peeling, the delicate rigging was hopelessly tangled and coated in glitter. I had screamed, I had cried, and Brianna, when confronted, just shrugged. I was just playing. I thought it was a toy boat. I was making it magical. My aunt and uncle had rushed to her defense. "She didn't mean any harm, Maya. Don't be so dramatic." My parents, trying to keep the peace, told me, "It's just a model, honey. We can get you another one." But it wasn't just a model. It was 3 months of my focus, my patience, my passion. and they had let her drown it in glitter and lies. They taught her that day that her whims were more important than my work. They taught her she could destroy things without consequence. They taught me that my anger was dramatic, and my grief was an overreaction. So I learned to stop showing them my grief. I learned to stop showing them my passion. I built walls around the things I loved, hiding them from Brianna's careless, grasping hands, and the family's placid enabling. The starlight quilt was the last thing I had believed was safe, locked away in its box, protected by my expertise and Aunt Clara's authority. I had underestimated Brianna's audacity and my family's infinite capacity for looking the other way. She hadn't just destroyed the quilt. She had destroyed the last shred of my hope that she, or any of them, could ever change. As I sat there in the dark lake house, I realized she hadn't just been making it magical. All those years ago, she had been asserting her power to remake the world in her own image, to erase anything that didn't center her. The ship, the quilt, they were just collateral damage in her lifelong campaign for the spotlight. This time, I wouldn't be dramatic. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. This time, I would use the skills they had always dismissed as quiet and boring. My meticulousness, my patience, my reverence for the facts. I was going to build a case against her so solid, so undeniable, that it would become its own kind of monument. A monument to the truth she had tried to tear apart. My next step was to create a different kind of reveal. Not a flashy one with mimosas and photographers, but a quiet, devastating one. I compiled everything into a single, elegant presentation. Arthur Pence's official appraisal letter, complete with his scathing assessment of the wearable art. A detailed historical record of the quilt I had prepared for the museum archives years ago. High-resolution photos of the quilt in its pristine, whole state, contrasted with close-ups of the jaggedly cut fragments on the jackets. Screenshots of Brianna's website, with the $2,800 price tag circled in red. A copy of our great-great-grandmother's diary entry from 1872, where she wrote about starting the quilt as a map for the daughters who will come after me. I printed 15 copies. Then, I waited for the perfect moment. It came a week later, when my uncle, Brianna's father, sent a cheerful email to the entire extended family. The subject line was, "So proud of our girl. Let's celebrate Brianna's success." He was hosting a celebratory dinner at a fancy restaurant in the city. "Let's all raise a glass to her incredible artistic vision," the email concluded. Y eres fue pedies. The night of the dinner was surreal. The private room was filled with the same people who had applauded her on the porch. Brianna was at the head of the table, holding court, basking in the attention. She was wearing one of her creations, the jacket featuring the piece of my mother's wedding dress. My mom was sitting right next to her, smiling, not saying a word. I felt a cold detachment, as if I were watching a documentary about a strange alien tribe. They went around the table, offering toasts. To Brianna, for always following her dreams. To turning the old into the new. When it was my turn, I stood up, my folder in hand. I didn't raise my glass. "I'd like to add a little context to what we're celebrating tonight," I said, my voice clear and steady. The room went quiet. I could feel Brianna's eyes on me, her smile faltering. "I know we're all very impressed with Brianna's fragmented history line," I began, making air quotes with my fingers. but I felt it was important for everyone to understand the true nature of the materials she worked with. I started passing out the folders, one for each person. I watched their faces as they opened them. The cheerful chatter died, replaced by a thick, uncomfortable silence. I saw my uncle's face pale as he read Arthur Pence's valuation. I saw my mother's hand fly to her mouth as she saw the photo of her wedding dress, next to the photo of it on Brianna's jacket sleeve. Brianna snatched the folder from her father's hands. Her eyes darted across the first page. "What is this?" she hissed, her voice shaking. "What are you doing?" "I'm doing my job," I said calmly. "I'm archiving. On page 1, you'll find the official appraisal of the Starlight quilt, which was valued at over $150,000. On page 2, you'll find Mr. Pence's professional opinion that by cutting it up, its value was reduced to 0. He also refers to the act as a crime against history, which I thought was a nice touch. I let that hang in the air. "On the subsequent pages," I continued, my voice never rising, "you'll find the quilt's full provenance, which proves its irreplaceability. And finally, at the back, a screenshot of your website, where you are attempting to sell the desecrated fragments of our family's legacy for $2,800 apiece. I believe the term for that is fraud." Brianna slammed the folder shut. "This is insane. It was an old blanket. It was in a box. I gave it a new life." "You committed an act of cultural vandalism for profit," I corrected her. "You lied to your customers about the nature of what you were selling, and you destroyed an irreplaceable asset that belonged to this entire family, but was in the specific care of Great-Aunt Clara." My uncle finally found his voice. "Now, Maya, let's not be dramatic." "Dramatic?" I turned to him, and for the first time, a flicker of my real anger showed. "Was it dramatic when you let her destroy my model ship and told me to get over it? Was it dramatic every time she showed contempt for everything this family is supposed to cherish, and you all called it creativity? This isn't drama. This is a balance sheet, and the bill has come due." I looked back at Brianna, who was staring at me with pure hatred. "You did this to humiliate me," she whispered. "No," I said, picking up my purse. "I did this to honor our great-great-grandmother, and our grandmother, and my mother. You think history is something you can cut up and sell, but you're about to learn that history has consequences." I left them all there, sitting in stunned silence in that sterile, expensive room, the truth laid out on the table in neat, undeniable folders. I didn't look back. The war wasn't over, but the first decisive battle had been won. The fallout was immediate and spectacular. It was like a dam breaking. The carefully constructed wall of family denial crumbled under the weight of the documented facts. My uncle, faced with the reality that his daughter had destroyed a 6-figure asset, was furious. Not for the history, but for the money. My mother finally broke down, weeping that she never thought Brianna would go that far. But the real earthquake came from Great-Aunt Clara. I had driven to her house the morning after the dinner and walked her through the entire folder. She couldn't see the pages clearly, so I read every single word to her, my voice shaking with suppressed emotion. She sat in her armchair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her face a mask of stone. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. When I was finished, she was silent for a full 5 minutes. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hall, counting down the seconds of a world that had fundamentally changed. Finally, she spoke, her voice frail, but laced with steel. There are two kinds of people in this world, Maya, she said. The builders and the breakers. For generations, our family has been builders. We built a life. We built a home. And we stitched our story into that quilt. Brianna, she is a breaker. She reached for her phone. "Get me my lawyer on the line," she said. 2 weeks later, another family gathering was called. This one wasn't at a restaurant. It was in the formal, wood-paneled office of Aunt Clara's estate lawyer, a man named Mr. Thompson, who looked like he'd been born wearing a three-piece suit. Brianna was there with her parents. She refused to look at me, her face sullen and puffy. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat and adjusted his spectacles. "We are here today to discuss an addendum to the last will and testament of Clara Vance." He slid a document across the table. "Effective immediately, the lake house and its surrounding properties, previously designated to be split among all heirs, will be placed into a trust. The sole trustee of this trust," he paused for effect, "will be Maya." A collective gasp went through the room. My uncle shot to his feet. "That's preposterous! You can't do that!" "I can!" Aunt Clara's voice cut through the air. She was on speakerphone, her voice crackling but firm. "The purpose of the trust will be to establish a small, private museum and archival center for the preservation of our family's history. It is my final wish that what remains of our legacy be protected from those who would seek to exploit or destroy it." Brianna let out a choked sound. "This is because of me," she said. "This is Maya's fault." "No, dear." Aunt Clara's voice was devoid of all warmth. "This is your doing. You took our most sacred story and you cut it into pieces for money and attention. You proved you cannot be trusted with our legacy. Maya proved she is the only one who can. The matter is closed." But it wasn't, because I had one more card to play. I had quietly sent my entire dossier to a well-known blogger who specialized in exposing unethical practices in the fashion and influencer industry. I sent it anonymously, of course. The article dropped the following Monday. The headline was, "Fragmented History or Fractured Ethics. Influencer Brianna Vance built her new line on a desecrated family heirloom valued at $150,000. It went viral. The story had everything. The entitled influencer, the destruction of a priceless antique, the emotional family backstory, the jaw-dropping price tags. The blogger had even interviewed Arthur Pence, who gleefully went on the record. The comment section was a bloodbath. Brianna's brand partners, the ones who sponsored her authentic lifestyle, started dropping her within hours. Her talent agency released a statement saying they were evaluating their relationship. Her followers, the ones who had praised her vision, were now calling her a monster, a fraud, a vandal. She had built her empire on a carefully curated image, a veneer of charm and creativity. And with one single well-documented story, I had burned that image to the ground. She had tried to erase my family's history, and in return, I had erased her future. People love to say that forgiveness is a virtue, and that holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. But sometimes, anger isn't a poison. Sometimes, it's an antidote. It's the clarifying force that burns away years of denial and forces you to see the truth. My anger wasn't hot and messy. It became cold and precise. It became a tool. The starlight quilt can never be made whole again. I know that. I have the surviving fragments. The scraps Brianna discarded, laid out in my studio. Sometimes I just look at them, these ghosts of what was. The tiny embroidered star, the faded square of calico. Each one is a wound. But what I built from its destruction is, in its own way, a new kind of legacy. The Vance Family Archive and Museum at the Lake House is now a reality. We received a grant last fall. We have a small staff. We work with local schools to teach children about history, about preservation, about how the stories of ordinary people, stitched into fabric or written in a diary, are just as important as the stories of kings and generals. I never spoke to Brianna again. I hear she moved out of state, deleted her social media, and works a quiet office job. Her name, once a brand, is now a cautionary tale whispered in marketing forums. My family is fractured, perhaps permanently. Some see me as a hero, others, a vindictive destroyer. They don't understand that I wasn't trying to destroy the family. I was trying to save its soul. The lesson in all of this isn't simply that you should stand up for yourself. It's that you must understand what you are fighting for. Brianna was fighting for attention, a fleeting and hollow prize. I was fighting for a 150-year-old story, and stories, I've learned, are far more resilient than influencers. You can't cancel them. You can't deplatform them. They endure. The quilt is gone, but its story is now more powerful than ever. It's no longer confined to a box in a closet. It's out in the world, a testament to the fact that some things are not meant to be reimagined or upcycled. Some things are meant to be honored. And when someone tries to desecrate what is sacred, you don't have to be dramatic. You just have to be more meticulous, more patient, and more devoted to the truth than they are to their lies. You have to become the archivist of their downfall. So I want to ask you, the person watching this right now, have you ever had something you loved treated as if it were worthless? A passion, a memory, a piece of your own history? Let me know in the comments below. And if you believe that some things are worth protecting at any cost, subscribe. Because this channel is for the builders, the protectors, the archivists of the world, and our stories deserve to be told.